Hello, welcome back to the Voice of Healing. I'm Cray Blake, General Overseer of John G. Lake Ministries. Last week, if you were with us, you heard as I detailed some of Dr. John G. Lake's life and ministry. Now, one of the things that we didn't get to talk about was some of the healing room history, and I wanted to share some of that with you real quickly before we get back into the prophecy that I talked a little bit about but didn't get to go into. Dr. Lake's healing rooms were in operation from 1915 until 1920. They were in the Rookery Building in Spokane. And when he left in May of 1920, he moved to Portland, Oregon, as I told you last week. And he moved from there, and eventually he ended up moving back to Spokane, actually in 1931. And when he left in 1920, from that time on, there were no healing rooms in any building, in the Rookery Building or any of that at that time. As a matter of fact, Dr. Lake passed away in 1935, September 16th. Remember that date, September 16th, 1935. And after he passed away in the late 30s, the Rookery Building burnt to the ground. And later on, they were rebuilt, but it was a completely different building with a different orientation. The doors came in a different way, different floor heights, all of that. There was nothing of the original building left standing. Now, I know there's been different talk about the healing rooms and saying they were the same building and same carpet and different things. That is just not true. The building was destroyed in 1935. As a matter of fact, just a couple of years ago, I was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and the spirit of prophecy came upon me, and I began to prophesy about a current ministry that was there that actually, I made a statement that said that God was not going to allow the Rookery Building to stand, and within 14 days after that, the first earthquake to hit Spokane in 75 years completely, well, let me say it this way. The actual records are this. The only building condemned due to damage, structural damage because of the earthquake, was the Rookery Building. And so they had to close the building, they got out of there, and the building has been condemned. So that just started to show you something. Anyway, now moving along, because I wanted to get back to Dr. Lake and back to the prophecy. Now, in 1934, May 24th of 1934, Dr. Lake was in his church there in Spokane, and he gave a prophecy concerning the person that would pick up the ministry. And so I wanted to give you some of that, but before I get into that, I want to share with you a little bit about our life and history, because people want to know how we got the ministry, how I became General Overseer. Well, this is how it happened. Now, I was born April 1st, 1959, down in Jasper, Texas, and within I was 17 months old, in September 16th of 1960, whenever I was at a family reunion. My parents, my dad went to leave to go to the store and didn't see me as I had walked out after him, got behind the car, and he didn't see me and backed over me. And when he backed over me, it actually ripped my right ear completely off. It ripped the scalp from this ear across to the other ear and pulled everything down like a mask. All of this was pulled down to my eyes. It was all connected there, but elsewhere it was all ripped apart. My grandfather came out. Well, actually, my dad went running back into the house screaming, "I've killed our baby, I've killed our baby." My grandfather came out, picked me up, picked up my ear, put me in his truck, took me to the hospital, and, of course, the rest of the family followed. But the doctor that was in charge of my case started telling my family, "Don't expect him to live." And he was very adamant about it, said there's no way, there's too much damage. And so they went in to do some surgery and do what they could. And my mom, who's a little Pentecostal woman, began praying and said, "God, we dedicate him to you. He's yours. We'll raise him and teach him for you, but let him live." And so after about I think an hour and a half, roughly an hour and a half, the doctor came out and said, it looks like he might actually live through this, but even if he does, he will be a vegetable all of his life. There's too much brain damage. There's too much damage done. And so just be ready for it, because you'll have to take care of him all his life. Well, he went back in to do some more surgery, and my mom went back to praying. Said, "God, that's not good enough. If you're going to let him live, let him be normal." And well, to be very honest with you, there's still some controversy over whether I'm normal or not. But pretty much everybody that calls me abnormal also call me when they get sick. So, it was funny, because for years, even after I was married and into my late 20s, there were times when I would feel certain things in my scalp that would be real sharp and hard, and I would just, just keep messing with something until finally it would break through the skin, and it would be a small piece of shell rock that was actually still in my scalp from whatever I was ran over. That was the type of gravel that driveway had. and it was stuck in the scalp. And so for years there was pieces coming out. And I know, believe me, I've heard all the jokes about having rocks in my head. And well, again, I had one person tell me one time, said, you're just not normal. And I said, well, that may be, but leave me alone. It's working for me. So after roughly about 6 hours total surgery, the doctor came back out and said, we can't find any signs of real brain damage yet, but it's real swollen up. And but even if he does make it, even if he does live, and even if he is normal by any stretch, he will never have any hearing in his right ear, and he will never have any hair. And so obviously you can tell I have hair, and I've had hair down to my shoulders at one time many years ago, and I got perfect hearing in my right ear. My IQ's been tested at least normal, and so everything that the doctor said was wrong. You need to remember that sometimes. Everything the doctors say can be wrong. And everything that my mother prayed and asked God to do, He did. And so after that, I was raised up. By the time I was, I didn't go to school right away. As a matter of fact, my mom kept me at home. I was an only child. She taught me how to read using the King James Bible. My dad worked nights, and so many times instead of my mom reading me to sleep, I actually read her to sleep. She would make me read the Bible out loud, and many times she would fall asleep. And it's kind of funny because I tell people I still do that today, is read people to sleep by using the Bible. But so anyway, we went on, and as I grew up, when I turned 9, my parents were working, and I walked across the street to a little Nazarene church and got saved and walked down the aisle and gave my heart to Christ. And then at 17 decided to go into the Air Force and be a security police law enforcement specialist, and was going into pararescue. And at that time, God started dealing with me about preaching. And I didn't know, I knew God had spared my life. I didn't know about my dedication to Him and all the things going on. So, I didn't know all the details at that point, but I just knew God was calling me. So as I answered the call,